would it be possible for me to see the faces of the participants, or it will be only one way?
We request all the participants to please switch on their
Wherever it is
cameras.
possible, because I mean, if it is possible, fine. Otherwise, no problem. I know there might be some technology related issues, because you know, these days a lot of discussion is going on that we teach through screens. So we talk to screens, we deliver through screens, and we don't see any movement on a screen. So we have become more mechanical. I was just, this is something which I keep telling wherever I take a lecture, that it is better at least I see some movement on the screen. I see some smiles, some anger, or some kind of responses on the screen, so that at least you get some kind of feedback which drives you. Otherwise, it remains a one-way traffic. Okay, so wherever it is possible, maybe I think I would also ask you to uh, respond or give your feedback, and participate in the process, because it should not be something like, that I come here, I deliver the talk, and then class gets over. Okay, so uh, I'm sure that the way things are going on and the way you have, I think today only this session has, your program has started. And I was looking at the structure of the program, which is very nicely crafted by the team, which is looking after this whole conduct of the program. And my part is to talk about leadership. And as you might all know, that leadership is something which is facing the time. I mean, it is facing a challenge of time in the kind of environment that we are operating. So what I was thinking, since there are more or less there are going to be teachers here in this session, I would be more talking about how literature has moved in leadership. How and what kind of works have gone in, and what is the trend of leadership research overall? And I'm sure that this would benefit you from the perspective of looking at the past, and thinking about the future, that how future might be, or what you can contribute towards the future. I'm sure I'm audible to all of you. So, when we look at leadership as such, many times to a layman, this comes to the mind that, leadership is something which in Hindi, which gets translated as netagiri. And when we say netagiri, somehow it has a tone. It has some kind of a tone of a reflection, which is not very positive. Uh, as such, since here we are talking about business, we are talking about organizations, we will be more talking about organizational research from the domain of psychology, primarily into leadership. Uh, we need to know this, that leadership is nothing new. It was there in ancient times, and ever since there has been a rule. Even when we look at the lives of animals, so even before civilization, a leadership has been there. But when we look at the literature, in literature, maybe I think if we look at the ancient times, or the times before human civilization, we find different kind of stories which are there in one way. Okay, so maybe when we look at leadership literature from organizational point of view, it is not that organized, but leadership has always been there. Okay, so whether we look at the animals, whether we look at the individuals during human civilization, and later years, and as today. leadership is something which plays a key role in designing or in taking decisions of different kinds, and that's where the individual is given that power. And so power is something which is one of the prerequisites when we talk about leadership. So we will be looking at that. And another thing which I would like to share here, when we talk about leadership from the perspective of an unorganized literature domain, we see leadership uh, in different geographies in different ways. So if you look at the Roman Empire, there is a talk, there is a discussion on leadership. If you look at Greek philosophy, you have literature there talking about leadership, and you have if you look at this Asian side, you have ancient literature talking about leadership. Whether we look at the mythological test, I was looking at the structure of program, and I learned that there are going to be a few sessions on Indian ethos and leadership related issues. So I think you will get to know more from that. So primarily when we talk about leadership, leadership has been more talked in political science or from the angle of politics or the rule. Uh, then we do see that in psychology domain, leadership has contributed to. So psychologists have worked a lot in philosophy. Okay, so if you read the text of the Prince by Machiavelli, you find a lot of teachings which makes the ruler. Okay, or if you look at Bharatiya Darshan, also you find the relationship there. And then we come to economics, or we come to business or management, and we find that there the organized literature is available, where which is the agenda today that we are going to talk about, how leadership research has gone in last say around 120 years or so, 120 130 years. Okay, so that is where when people realized that it is beyond the genes. It is that it is something that we can teach, or this is something which can learn. Okay, and that is how you find literature there. Initially, leadership as such was not taught in the means as a discipline. As you know, we consider, of course, we have been pushed to that kind of thinking, that economics means Adam Smith was father of economics. So it is around 18th century. Okay, though there are things related to that, economics was there even 2,500 years back. So I'm not going to go into those details. So, and when we look at business, so the whole idea of teaching business came into existence by the end of the 19th century. Okay, and that was a time when business was taught in some kind of schools, colleges, and in the United States. In UK, business education came much later. Okay, so you see the existence of, I mean, emergence of Wharton School, and then Harvard School, and institutions of that kind, where business was taught. When business was taught at that during that time only, you find researchers done in the domain of leadership. So what I'm going to talk and share here with you is the organized literature on leadership, especially from the perspective of business leadership. Okay, so from the perspective of business. So as I told you, we find the traces of a business, traces of leadership from philosophy, from psychology, from political science. But here we try to concentrate more on from the perspective of business. Okay, so this is a what we call a disclaimer in the beginning itself. I'm giving you so that you understand what is going to be the focus of discussion today with all of you. So when we look at leadership literature, we find that it all started with a belief that leaders are born. And many of you must have studied. I think you might, if you have studied commerce or business management or disciplines of this kind, you might all be knowing that there was a belief of leaders are born, or this is a, then move to it's a made. So when we look at this belief of saying that leaders are born, we find that that was something which is related highly to the trade theory. Okay, so when we look at trade theory, the research on trade theory primarily happened in the first, say, if you overall look at the literature, it is the first 50 years of the 20th century. So you can say from 1990 to 1948, 1950 around, there was a concentration of literature. There was a lot of people working on different geographies, different places, where they were looking at the traits which people possess. So they were looking at the successful leaders, and then trying to develop theories from finding out those characteristics which most of the people possess, or which were common in all the people, all the leaders. Okay, and from there they said that it is, if people possess these traits, they become leaders. So by nature, by birth, people are leaders. So it is there in their genes. This was a belief that leaders are born. So people were, there were different kind of researchers all across. And then the first 50 years was the time of the dominance of a trade theory. And the later 50 years, if you look at, of course, there is then contingency and behavioral approach, both. The dominance of behavioral theory. I will be discussing about these theories a little, and I'm sure many of you might know the theories, but if you look at in a chronological order, you'll understand it better. So in those 50 years, of course, the research on behavioral theory also started in the first 50 years, but the dominance was of the trade theory. So when we look at the dominance of trade theory, which was primarily focusing on the characteristics, personal characteristics of individuals who were leading. So the belief that was studies done by Stockdale and team in his team, which said that leaders are born, and leaders are not made initially. Okay, of course, Stockdale later worked on the behavioral theory, and we will be talking about that, how behavioral theory came into being. And similarly, at different places, work was going on. They were looking at different approaches through different approaches. They were trying to defend the argument that leaders are born. Mann's study said that people are born intelligent. So intelligent people, they become better leaders. Okay, so they become successful leaders. So intelligence was looked at in Mann's study. Intelligence was looked at as as a characteristic which a person is born. Okay, so we all know that how these things work. Then Lombardo's work, Macal and Lombardo's work also, uh, uh, you know, strengthen those arguments where they found out four kind of strong characteristics that leaders have emotional ability. Okay, so either uh, their emotive faculties are strong, and that is because their parents had similar such things. People are they were more in, they were admitting their errors, and this is by nature that they admit if they have committed some errors, and they have good intellectual breadth, and that is how Michael Lombardo also talks about the similar such things on the traits. Uh, uh, Venice did work. Of course, that work was done later, after 1950s, where he talked about common traits among people, by they are able to manage attention, they are able to manage, they are able to assign meaning. And when he they were when Venice was talking about assigning meaning to the work that people are performing. So the leader's job was to align and convey to the followers that, see, these are the organizational goals, and this is where is your individual goal or the individual goal of the followers. So they have to be aligned, and they were assigning meaning to it. So if you achieve organizational goal, it will lead you to achieve your individual goal. And that is how uh, uh, he was able to defend that there is a meaning, or there is a management meaning. Then there was another component in Bannis study that was of trust, and I will be talking about trust later as well when we talk about the contemporary issues in leadership, or in the contemporary literature, how trust and loyalty is finding place in the work of different researchers. And then is the management of self. So if people manage themselves better, so uh, similarly, if we look at the behavioral theory, one aspect of, in behavioral theory, I will just touch upon certain points related to authentic leadership. And authentic leadership is basically focusing more on the management of self. And so Bennett's contribution also goes into that trait of things. And again, in trade theory later, Bennis also found out that people who are successful leaders, these leaders have strong people skills. Okay, so then and these days this term is very common. Many times we come across this common term that this person is a people person. Okay, so people person means they are people are these leaders are extrovert, they connect with people, and they look at their concerns, respond to their concerns, and things like that. So people skill, as you know, even today when we talk about leadership in contemporary world, we find that uh, where we are talking about uh, management of self, we are also relating it with a strong means feeling of commitment towards the team members. Okay, so that goes together. And like in the literature on human resources or human resource management, we keep talking about putting right people to right job. Leadership literature is filled with some such works where it talks about that leader has an eye for the right person. Okay, and this is a trait which a leader is born with, because leader knows that this person is will fit the bill and will fit the profile, or will fit the task that is required to be done. Okay, so this kind of judgments when people are making, the study done by Bennis also concluded that these kind of leaders have a strong judging power. so they can judge people and put them according. And this is something which is very interesting. Uh, if we look at overall traits, means there is a debate on traits and skills. So skills can be learned. Even at that time, people were talking about that whether people, if it is all, leadership is all about skills, so skills can be learned. But there were researchers who were saying that leadership is not all about the skills. Leadership is all about what you possess. Okay, so whatever you possess, if you can use that in order to acquire new skills, in order to be relevant at different times, then you can become a better leader. So overall, if you look at all the traits, okay, so if we look at the trait theory, which talks about means a belief that leaders are born, or leaders means by nature people have this quality of being a leader. They are the traits would be that, I'm just if you have gone through the work of Gary Yule on this. So Gary Yule also has worked on both. He has a model for what you call behavioral theory, and he also has worked on the traits that people possess. He says that, people should be leader is a person who is dependable, who is energetic, who is assertive, who is a confident, self-confident, who has a strong sense of persistence, who is tolerant to stress, and things like that. So these are traits. It was a belief, and it was a belief that leaders are born in the first 50 years, and most of the researches were done during that time. But then the research that I'm citing of Gary Yule is not of that period, but even later people were talking about the traits. So I have taken this work of Gary Yule, which was done later, but which was talking about the traits that that is the time that we talked about. But trait theory had its own limitations. Are you able to understand whatever I am discussing now? Is there any question of any kind? Anybody? Yes, please. Devika.
Professor, that was that a thumbs up that I'm understanding everything. At present, I do not have any questions. Quite
Okay.
interesting
Anybody?
deliberations that are going on.
Anybody?
Yes, sir. It's
Anybody?
clear till now. It's clear
Huh.
till now.
It's clear till now. Okay. Uh, you know, of course, I started with the literature. I started with state theory, but when we look at leadership, for a leader, there are three things which are important. Okay, can anybody say from your own thinking what those three things could be? Yeah, anybody?
Professor, I think two of them are people and processes. Out of the three,
People
two
are
it
okay.
should be people and processes,
Uh,
and third should be the relationship that the leader has with the people he's working or she's working with.
I'm not talking about leader per se. I'm talking about leadership. Yeah, someone says
Leader,
patience. Someone is
situation,
saying
and
empathy.
people, followers.
So maybe they're
Uh-huh.
taking the
Okay.
responsibility of the team
Uh-huh. Taking the responsibility. No,
in the project.
again, I'm saying I'm talking about leadership. I'm not talking about leader. Whatever you people are saying, this is more. This is individual to the leader. So whatever you are saying, it is related to trait. I'm talking about leadership overall. So for leadership, a leader is a person who enjoys a lot of power. You get it? So a leader is not there if leader doesn't have power. Leader has to have power. Power is something which is important for leader. Number two, if you look at you have in, with if you just have power, but you can't influence, okay, then it is not leadership. So influence and power, they have to move together. Okay, so there has to be influence. Okay, so From where do you get influence? You might get influence from position. Maybe I think somewhere I will be talking about that. So if for leader, there are three things which are important for leadership. Sorry, there are three things which are important in leadership. There has to be power, there has to be influence, and there has to be goal compatibility. So there is a goal. Leader has to achieve the goal, whatever is the goal. Okay, so leadership is nothing but the ability to influence the people, influence the group, okay, through power to achieve the goals. Okay, so a leader enjoys power. Leader is an influencer. Someone says rightly, very right. So leader is an influence. Leader, see, when you look at a leader, always you listen to a leader. You and when we talk about leaders, we talk about group behavior. So group behavior means there are two or more persons. So for a leader, for strong leadership, there has to be a group of followers. So without followers, leader is there because there are followers. In the absence of followers, leadership has no meaning. Okay, so no, not necessarily. Yeah, someone says when we say it is power means does it have some negative connotations? No, it's not. Okay, anybody who enjoys power is a leader. Okay, so many times we discuss this, and it's very interesting. People say that whether teacher has a power or not. Okay, a teacher has a power or not? Huh?
No.
Anybody?
No, sir. No, I don't think so.
You don't think so? Okay. Anybody else?
Teacher has power, sir, to change the way of thinking students and
Okay.
motivating them. In that way,
No.
power,
In
sir.
yes, sir. In that way, we can say, but the power as an influencer, it is fine that he has that power that he can influence the student. Like she said, he can motivate the students and all, but he can show the path as well. But
Teachers have
power,
a
I
expertise
think,
power, sir.
yeah, you can say, yes.
You see, teacher has a lot of power. Okay,
They have a
and for
difference
that
power.
matter,
Yes, sir. Positions power, difference power, and expertise
different
power. All
nature.
they have.
Okay, so why the moment we say teacher, the moment we say power, when someone was saying negative connotation, that's why I asked this question. Okay, it is not. It is not that a teacher has to have a position, or a person has to have a position to enjoy power. One can enjoy power even without a position. It's basically the influence which makes a person leader.
Sir, sometimes it's a coercive power they have also. So sometimes they have a coercive power also even students have.
Yes, they do have
reward power. They have
They
also.
have positive power.
Because students want some reward, and if we can give it, then students
Very
definitely we have a power of that.
It's nice. I mean, in fact, if you look at power, the power which is related to position, and if teacher is in a position, teacher enjoys that power. But if there is a guru, if there is a teacher, if you teach a teacher, I mean, don't take a literal meaning of working in a university, college, or a school. A teacher who is influencing, who has
Sir,
some followers.
I want to, sir, excuse me, I want to add on this.
Yeah.
Dronacharya uses his power on Karna that in that particular session.
Yes.
So here is a negative power, na sir?
This is the coercive power.
Yeah.
This is the coercive power. But see, how power is used, I'm not talking about that. Yeah, power can be misused. There is an abuse of power. A lot of people have positional power, but they abuse power. So we are not really talking about that. So having power makes you a leader because you are influencing. So if you influence for wrong reasons, you are not considered to be a very good leader in the long term. Maybe it's a momentary thing for which you are a leader, but then later people are not going to consider you as a strong leader that way. You get my point? So what I'm saying is that when we look at the literature on leadership, we find that there are researches done on different domains. Okay, so all the three components that I'm talking about, Lot of works are there on study of influence. Lot of works are there on study of power, and lot of works are there on measurement of performance or achievement of goals. So when you look at all the three together, that's what makes leadership. That's what when a leader achieves a goal for through influencing others, such leaders are considered to be good leaders. That's how we look at leadership literature. And what I was saying initially, that if you look at the trend in literature or trend in writing on leadership or research on leadership per se, you find that the first 50 years of the 20th century were dominant with they were means the works on trade theory dominated those 50 years. But slowly there was a movement. They said no, and that is where I'm going to come next. And that is where when we look at you know when we look at what when we look at this another side, whether leaders are really born or leaders can also be made. Okay, we find that the existence of business schools, okay, which in the initial years of 20th century, which started teaching leadership, which started making leaders, and they said, see, it is not that leaders are only born, but leadership is something which can be taught, which can be learned, and that's how researchers move. And majorly after the Second World War, you find works which happened, especially in the domain, means in the universities of the kind that we talk about, uh, in Ohio University or Michigan University. These two universities work, and which started with the initial work was done by Kurt Lewin in 1939, who developed the 3D model of a 3D theory, three-dimensional theory of leadership. So he said that through his research, he concluded that there are leaders of different kinds, which depends on behavior. Okay, so that is how behavior, the beginning of behavioral theory, one can say, started in the later part of 30s and then matured in later part of 40s, and publications started coming 1948 first time on behavioral theory. People Stockdale's work was recognized. Of course, in 1939 initially Kurt Lewin had already talked about these three dimensions. If you look at what you have, you generally go through the popular contribution on Ohio Studies work. Okay, the borrowings are from Kurt Lewin's work, Kurt Lewin's 1939 model. That is where he talked about three kinds of leadership. One, autocratic leaders. But if you look at the two dimensions also, that one dimension is where we talk about task, another dimension where we talk about consideration of that kind. Okay, so he said that leaders, there is an autocratic leadership, and autocratic leadership is a learned leadership. Okay, so it can be learned. People become autocratic by whether the system drives them or what they learn around. Okay, then we talked about democratic leadership. Democratic leadership where people are cooperating, people are free to speak their mind, where people are given the environment where people are expressing themselves. So democratic leadership. And if a leader follows this path, he makes people to follow organizational democracy or things of that kind. And the third dimension was less fair. Less fair means people are free to work. There is not much of control by the leader. So these three dimensions given by Kurt Lewin, which got maturity when we talk about Stockdale's contribution, Ohio or Michigan work, which popularly is there. But uh, as a teacher, I think all of you should know that the birth of these three dimensions took place in the work of Kurt Lewin. Okay, where talks about autocratic leaders, autocratic leadership, then democratic leadership, and laissez-faire leadership. Okay, and in these three dimensions, he said that the most important dimension is the democratic dimension. Okay, and if leaders are democratic, they give an ear to their followers and they learn how to listen to their followers and respond to their call. Then people can become good leaders, and that was something which was the beginning of behavioral theory. And as I told you, that less fair is spelled as LAISSEZ, less FAIRE, less fair. I think when we talk about free trade, that is what is less fair. Okay. Good that in between you are writing, so at least I am able to respond to. Good. So, Ohio, as I told you, Ohio's work, the which is very popular when we look at this what we call leadership literature, especially the behavioral theories. You know, what you might not find in many of the books is that how they reach to this two dimensions. Okay, uh, you know, there was a question. There was LBDQ and SBDQ. LBDQ is something that means there is the questionnaire, the type of questionnaire, leadership behavior description questionnaire. Okay, and there was a supervisor behavior description questionnaire. So from LBDQ, they took out, saw they had something like, you know, the items which were generated or something like 1,800 items, around 2,000 items. And then, you know, there were people, if people were asked that what do they look for in a leader and what makes a good leader and things like that. And that is where you find that much of the components were behavioral components, not really related to the trait. So there was a component like demand reconciliation, or there was a component of representation. There was a component like a tolerance of uncertainty. So all these components were put together, and they after the content face validity by the experts, they reduced these items to 150 items, and then to 12, and then uh, uh, after doing all kind of factor analysis, they found out two dimensions, two major dimensions where most of the items were moving. One was the consideration, and another was the initiating structure. So initiating structure is something which became related, which was related to task orientation, and consideration was related to the human orientation or friendliness or things of that kind. Okay, so both ways, both the dimensions came out in this work, and that's where uh, Stockdale himself looked at the trait theory which he had worked on, and then this behavioral theory, from where he found out that it is not that leaders are only born, leaders can also be made. Okay, and that is how Ohio University's work became a prominent work. And if you look at employee satisfaction surveys also started more or less during the similar time. I mean, you know this Bernard's work, where uh, Bayard's work, where 1955 he talked about job satisfaction and things of that kind, and Locke's contribution related to that expectation and satisfaction. So the focus of publications, leadership literature publications after 1950s dominated in the behavioral structure or the behavioral theory. And that's how we say that there was a movement from a belief that leaders are born or leaders are made. So earlier it was leaders were born, then they said no, leadership is something which can be learned as well. So when we say leadership can be learned, we talk about uh, 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 we moved from nature to nurture. Okay, so leadership, if you nurture leadership, people can become good leaders. Ohio State work was done in one geography, one university, and similar time on in the Michigan University, you find another work going on. Okay, uh, see, I was telling you about three dimensions of Kurt Levin's work. Okay, so Kurt Levin's work, which was published in 1939, uh, in in Ohio's work, all these three dimensions were, when we say initiating structure is very high, but consideration is low, it becomes autocratic. When we say initiating structure is low as well as consideration is low, it is less fair. Okay, so this was borrowed from the Kurt Levin's work. And when you have high initiating structure and high consideration, then you have democratic leadership, because where leader is providing guidance to people, leader is seeking their opinion, leader is also involving them in the process of decision making and things of that kind. And the fourth thing which was added by this Ohio State University work was human relations. Okay, so if consideration is high but initiating structure is low, so you go to a human relations. So where you are more focusing on human relations. So the this work was was based on the conditions after Second World War. But when it came to looking at the dimensions, there was a movement in two sides, and within those two sides, there was a borrowing or learning from the work of Kurt Lewin, and that is how the three dimensions were added into this work. Okay, and now we find the similar, as I told you, Gers McCovey's work, which was done in Michigan universities, Koch French in 1948, which got published. They found out four dimensions. Okay, so in these four dimensions, there was a closeness of supervision, where work is supervised very closely. There was differentiation of leadership role. So means there were productive teams, and how a leader changes. There is a differentiation in his behavior. Employee-centered versus product-centered supervision. Okay, so your focus is sometime employee-centered, sometime production-centered. And overall, the fourth thing which came in was group relation. So that is how it was concluded. So those two dimensions, if we look at, they were also there in this work, but there is some problem. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. Yes, sir.
I find some disturbance here. Okay, yeah, fine. So Michigan study, if you look at 1960 67 new patterns of management by Francis Likert, gave us four styles of leadership. These four styles of leadership also had the reflection of what Michigan University's work was. He was there, and these means four styles of leadership. We talk about exploitative, authoritative, benevolent, authoritative, which is a flow in the autocratic leadership, a consultative style, and the participative style. So these styles were also written during the similar time. if we have to look at Michigan University's work and the two key dimensions, much similar to Ohio University's work, we had production center and we had employee oriented thing. So the more, if a leader was more production centered, okay, so he was going towards autocratic leadership, and if a leader was more employee oriented, it was going to the human relations. Okay, so there was, what was required was a balance between these two, and this was a finding of this work. Both the works basically talked about these different dimensions, but they said that there has to be a balance between these kind of dimensions. Uh, Similar such work, if we look at the the contribution in behavioral theory, we also find out in managerial grade, and most of you I think might be knowing about managerial grade. I'm not going to discuss much on managerial grade. So the five dimensions that they means two dimensions and five positions that they looked at. Leadership managerial grade, which was initially started in 1964, became leadership grade in 1991, where they said that if it is more to do with the style of leaders, and leaders can learn more from here. So there has to be a concern for people, and there which has to be complemented with the concern for production. So it both have to be balanced. There has to be concern for people. There has to be concern for production. And the fifth dimension, fifth thing that they introduced was that organization middle of the road management, which takes you to to a team management, where you balance both that is concern for production as well as concern for uh, uh, people. Okay. Similarly, if you look at another model in 2002, Gary Yule came and gave another name to it. He said that, see, both are important, task and relationship. Same thing that was there in behavioral theory, behavior theory, Ohio State, Michigan, or we look at managerial, right? Gary Yule said that these two dimensions, okay, in there has to be adaptability. Okay, so this another thing was added. The third dimension was added by Gary Yule in one of the paper which was published in 2002. Now, when we look at behavioral theory was also not it was not that it was not criticized. There was a group of people, they were saying that it is not that a person will be task oriented or uh, relation oriented only. If the situation demands a person to be autocratic, person might become autocratic. So it depends. And this third factor of situation was added, which came into being later when we talk about situational leadership. Okay, so situational leadership is all about thinking on adding on this situation into these two. And this situational leadership basically is a contingency theory, as someone is writing. It is a contingency theory. So when we look at the later part of 20th century, till 70s, okay, you find people talking about this what we call behavioral theory. But it was initially in 1969 when both of them, Paul Hersey and Kenneth Blanchard, they came and worked on situational leadership, and later on matured it to 1988. So if you look at the literature from 50 to 70, it was a dominant of behavioral theory. But from 1970, 71 to 2000, okay, most of the works were on contingency. And situational leadership fell into that time. And situational leadership is that contains whatever is demanded, whatever means time demands, you respond accordingly. And that's how situational leadership came. Okay, and as a part of contingency. Uh, but when we look at in situational leadership, it was not just the situation which was important, but there were other dimensions which were also added. Okay, like maturity level, readiness of the follower, how means followers are taking it, and they talked about the styles of leaders in a different way. Okay, so they added to leadership literature through adding the major component, that is situation, and then looking at followers, willingness of the followers, readiness of followers, and it became a very popular theory in its 780s. Okay, and some of the companies like IBM, companies like Xerox, companies like Caterpillar or Bank of America, they also followed situational leadership. A lot of training sessions, like Kenneth Blanchard, who is a popular author. If you see the books that 1 Minute Manager series. So 1 Minute Manager, one Minute Manager series is from Ken Blanchard. Okay, so he has been writing into the popular mode as well. So many companies were following this, but somewhere people were talking about that. When we look at the maturity level of followers, the psychological factor are not taken that much of care when you talk about maturity level of followers, especially between R2 or R3, the as it moves. So as a style moves, S1, S2, S3, S4, same way, if you readiness of follower moves R1, R2, R3, R4, from 1 to 4. Okay, so people criticize this theory. There was a critique that that somewhere the psychological vigor which is required in this kind of theory is missing. Questions were also raised about immature employees, immature subordinates, or followers, how they have to be handled. And as you all know that none of the theory is foolproof, and this is all depending on the time, depending on the context that people talk about, and add to the knowledge pool or the literature of the domain. So there will always be some flaws or something left, or as you look back, you find when you see that in this particular time, in what kind of organizations were there, what kind of conditions were prevailing, and in that time this theory came in. Whether this is applicable today or not, that's a question. I mean, that's something that one has to look at. But it, this theory gave rise to lot of researches whereby people were exploring that what could be if you they were exploring beyond situation. Okay, and then the whole interface of trait theory and behavioral theory, and then with addition of situation, and then they said, see, it is not just these two dimensions, there could be many more dimensions. Okay, so that's why it became a contingency theory. Okay, that means as time changes, whatever is demanded by time, whatever is required, you respond to that. Okay, you know, the when we look at the literature in management, overall in management, not just on leadership, we find that there is a classical thought, there is a modern thought, and there is a thought which we say that a new narrative which is getting created, that is a postmodern narrative. And postmodern narrative is something which also applies to leadership. That is that uh, जैसा समय कहे आप वैसे हो जाएं. Whatever time demands, you become like that. Okay, so you justify all your acts, whatever you are practicing. You see, in behavioral theory, much of the work was on the basis of the primary surveys, questionnaires, the feedback of subordinates, leaders, and all that. But you find in the later part of the 20th century, initial part of the 21st century, there are works where you are looking at more of the practices, how or what organizations are doing, and what which organizations are successful organizations, or organizations which have sustained all weathers, the organizations which are still there, which were there 100 years back, which are still there and they are doing well. So what is that component which is still making them relevant, is still making them sustainable? And from that you derive a theory. And that is what you find in the later part of the 20th century and the initial part of 21st century. Researchers are more focusing on this kind of an environment. Okay. So in postmodern narrative, whatever you do, okay, you try, the researchers try to find commonality across organizations and leaders, and then see what is there which is common in them, and then develop a theory that if means if people follow this particular approach, it will be better. Okay, and that's how you find the drive in the flow of literature in leadership as well. So anyway, let's get back. So I was telling that situational leadership had its own flaws. When we talk about contingency theory, we cannot ignore the contribution done by Fiedler. Okay. Before I come to Fiedler, any question? Anybody has anything to say here? Yes. Anybody? No movement on screen. Uh-huh. Hello.
Hello, good afternoon, sir. The the concepts of transformational and leadership, transactional leadership, shall we be covering them towards a later part?
I will talk about it.
Okay,
I'll
okay,
talk about that.
fine. All right.
I'll come to that. Yeah, we will be talking about that. Anybody else has anything to say? Any other expectation on leadership? Yeah. Anybody? Anybody? Yes.
You're explaining it so well. It's very,
Anybody
very
has
clear.
anything to say? Anything?
No, sir. It is well understood, sir. You have explained it
All
quite
right.
well.
Okay.
Thank you so
okay,
much.
okay, okay. So I was telling you that Fiedler's contribution for contingency theory is one of the most important contributions. And Fiedler, again, it was also survey-based research which Fiedler conducted, which was, you must all be knowing about LPC, least preferred coworker. Okay, so did a survey, and with a lot of researchers, he found out that people where LPC level is low, okay, least preferred coworker, wherever LPCs are low level, you find that it is less favorable. And when we had this high LPC means people want to work with such people. Okay, so high LPC, it describes that there is a co-worker which is more favorable, which is there in the more favorable terms. Okay, and there is a uh, there is a continuation of one of the factor which was talked in Ohio State University work, Michigan work, and continued with the managerial grid, leadership grid. That was task structure. Okay, so they also found out that if uh, employees' roles are defined clearly, okay, then uh, uh, such people who understand their job better, people want to work with such people. Okay, so in the group, when when this survey was done in the group, what they found out that people who were not interacting with others, who did not have clarity of the role or the task that was assigned to them, these people were least preferred by their co-workers. Whereas people who had clarity, who knew their job, and they were a task structure which was well defined to them and understood by them, they had high LPs. And that is how we said that it would depend, maybe it would depend on the leader, how he explains the role, explains the task to subordinate, that people want to work with whom, people do not want to work. And that's how Fiedler's contingency model became popular. Fiedler's contribution also takes you to another theory, which is not means which is not discussed much in leadership literature as such. That is where he talked about cognitive resource theory. That people, since in the mind, people keep changing their preferences, and there is a a cognitive structure. They are driven by that. Okay, that is why you cannot say that in this given situation they will behave only in this way. Okay, so if the situation is X, they will behave in Y way. So they said that it will all depend. Okay, and as their cognitive faculties exchange, they come into there are different kind of intervention into their cognitive faculties. Their resources are added, or they acquire new skills, new knowledge set. Accordingly, people will accept them as a good leader, or people will, they will fall under uh, acceptance or rejection mode. Okay, and that is what CRT talked about, cognitive resource theory talks about. And then this is what Fiedler's contribution is on contingency theory. And you find that Fiedler's contribution also, means the researchers said that though this work, he made it public, and the survey reports from the people from whom the data was gathered, but he was questioned on the reliability, because the data reliability level was very low. Okay, and a lot of people argued, you find, who said that this kind of work cannot be taken as something which can be followed across. Okay, so there were a lot of questions raised on the methodology part of the work, and the reliability of the work, and the validity of the data that was put forth in LPC base. Okay. Now, when we look after this Fiddler's work, okay, we can, I mean, in some of the texts, if you find, if you see, you find that even transformational leadership or transactional leadership, these are also put together in a contingency theory. Whereas in some texts, they say, no, it is separate. But if you ask me, I would say that, these theories, you can say these are modern theories where they are talking about something which is more based on the kind of organizations they have studied. Okay, so I'll come to level 5 leadership and explain how that was developed, so you'll understand it. So if you give a caption of modern theories, you'll understand it better. And this was something which happened in the 80s and 90s. Okay, so more of the work came in literature in 80s and 90s on transformational leadership or transactional leadership or charismatic leadership. Okay. So starting with if you look at the transactional leadership is something which in leadership, from whenever you start leadership, you always, I think, as a teacher, might be teaching to students, you always distinguish between a leader and a manager. Okay, ask the student, or you see, who is a leader, who is a manager, and what is it that distinguishes a leader from a manager. Okay, transactional leadership is that kind of leadership which takes you more closer to remain a manager. Okay, a task is given to you, you achieve the goal within the given time. Okay, your means whatever goals are established by the what you call organization, what are communicated to you, you achieve them, you make a team, you achieve them. Okay, it is more, so this is where you are getting the work done by your followers. So both of you are working together and followers are working for you. You are able to achieve the task, you are able to achieve the goal. That is where you follow a transactional approach. So we say that transactional leadership is followed by a bookish managers. Okay, people people who are looking at the goals for a short term, short period. Okay, so they follow transactional approach. We say that many times, like when I started my class today, I said that I want to see movement on the screen. So the reason of the seeing the movement is not because my job is to teach, so I just teach and go. It is beyond that. Okay, so you want to see that how you are interacting with people. I mean, you are sending a message to that. If I ask a question, you respond to that. So there is a connectivity. Transactional approach is that I come to class, I deliver my lecture and go out, go back. Okay, so I have finished my lecture. Okay, and you have understood whatever I have taught, and the transaction gets over. And that's very, very transactional. Okay, and that you do find leaders of that kind. Okay, so leaders, when we look at transactional leaders are they do guide the followers, they do motivate the followers, but they are more on what is the role of the follower, what is the leader role, and just on the requirement of the task. What is required by the task? They don't see beyond that. Okay, and that is what is transactional leadership. Okay, and when we look at transformational leadership is transformational leader is not just looking at the target or goal. It is looking beyond that. Okay, a transactional leader is who is more concerned about what is it that he is going to leave behind. You might have read that book by Robin Sharma, What is it? Anybody? You read Robin Sharma?
Monk who sold
So the
his
monk who sold his Ferrari.
Oh, and the next book was Who Will Cry When You Die?
Yeah.
Okay, who will cry when you die? You know, it means you are little concerned about what you are going to leave behind. A leader is such a person who makes his presence felt, and he is not just a transformational leader. Sorry, transformational leader is such a leader who not only completes the task and achieves the goal of the organization, okay, who leaves behind some such experiences, okay, from where you find followers learn a lot. So he is leaving behind a legacy, and that legacy is for the followers. And that's what makes a transformational leader. If you look at the contribution of Bach, you look at the contribution of Burns, and a lot of other people who have classified transformational leaders and looked at their work, okay, and they said that, you know, transformational leaders are such people who are more into providing individualized consideration. Okay, what individuals want, they stimulate, they you know, it's not just you know, completing the syllabus. It is something taking you around the syllabus, uncovering the syllabus. It means teaching you things which are more important, and maybe they may not fall under the syllabus. Okay, so you find transformational leaders in organizations, they do achieve the task, they do achieve organizational goals, but they leave long-lasting effect. They leave long-lasting impression, and that's what is a transformation. Okay, so
We can
transformational
give
leadership
example
is,
of Steve Jobs.
yes, why not? But he was a transformational leader. There is an example of you know, Jack Welch. Jack Welch is a transformational leader who led GE for around 2 decades. Okay,
Right.
so
Right.
there are
Mahatma
leaders
Gandhi.
of the time. Mahatma Gandhi, yes, you can say Mahatma Gandhi was a transformational. Not many, in fact, I'm not just naming here, but try to understand the difference between. We say no, yeah, don't be transactional. Don't be transactional in your approach. Since all of you are commerce students, you would understand a transaction. You know, in accounting we teach accounting is nothing but recording of transaction and then analyzing, interpreting of information, or you know, basically when a transaction happens, you record it. There is no transformation happening in accounting. Okay, so because there is no human interaction. Okay, there is a transaction is over at the time of delivery of goods. Okay, we say that, you know, a transaction takes birth if a promise is made and there is a delivery of goods or service. Okay, there is a transaction. So person has not paid, so if a person has to pay, maybe after 2 months you will again you know, send a reminder, please pay, because in your books of accounts there is an open transaction. Okay, and you have recorded that this person has to pay, and transaction gets over. Okay, similarly in leadership also, and don't think that you know, transactional leadership is not in practice. Transactional leadership is in practice. Transactional leaders are those leaders who more concentrate on the goals, and they do motivate the workforce in order to achieve those defined goals, defined requirements. Okay, transformational leader is a leader who goes beyond, who does not just show you the goal of a goal that is going to be achieved, who tells you what other companies are achieving. So if he tells you about what other companies are doing, you get driven. You get motivated that this is what I think I should do. So he is helping you to assign a meaning. Okay, so you are trying to relate that, yeah, I think there is a meaning in what I'm doing. And to distinguish in these two terms very clearly, I tell you, transformational leadership is built on the top of transactional leadership. Achievement of goal cannot be compromised even by transformational leader, and that's important. So till you achieve organizational goal, it is transactional. But whatever you are leaving behind beyond that goal is transformation, and that is something which contributes to organizational growth or the growth of your supporters or your followers or understanding of your followers much better. And that is how you look at transformational leadership, and that's where it becomes important. There is another kind of leadership which we talk about, charismatic leadership. Charismatic leadership is also related to transformational leadership. In some of the texts, you will find that charismatic leadership is also explained as part of transformational leadership. So there is no problem. It can be. It can be so that if a leader has the charisma, okay, so leader enjoys, a leader
So,
influences.
sir, can we tell like charismatic leaderships are also transformational leaders?
Yes. If charismatic, for a transformational leader, charisma is one of the requirements. Transformational leadership, for transformational leadership, there are 2, 3, 4 requirements. Like charisma, you should have a vision, looking beyond the task, looking beyond the goal. Okay, so that vision one should have, and a transformational leader should have some kind of intellectual stimulation. Okay, so intellectual stimulation is also important. When we talk about intellectual stimulation, it is very much related to when I was telling you about Bennett's contribution, Warren Bennett's meaning. If you see, whatever you are doing, if you find a purpose in doing it, when you say that this is aligned with the purpose that is there in my mind, it means you are assigning meaning to it. And once you are able to assign meaning, okay, you get driven from within. You do not require external motivation. Okay, and that is what transformational leader does. Transformational leader motivates you and drives that faculty in you where you look beyond just performing the task that you are doing. That's what is the job of a transformation leader. And if you want to read more on this, look at Bernard Bass' contribution. You'll find how he has compared this, or Burns' contribution as well. Okay, so transformational leadership and transactional leadership, they are both related. Transformational leadership is built at the top of transactional leadership. And the term that we look at, that we talk about transformational leadership, when I was saying that it is, look at Burns' contribution, Bass' contribution, it is basically coined by McGregor Burns, and that is how we look at transformation. Now, if at all we have to look at charismatic leadership as part of transformational leadership, we see it as the influential power of the leader over followers. Okay, so popular leaders, they have lot of charisma. Okay, so uh, it has an impact on the behavior of the follower. It has it communicates the self of the leader to the follower. It has a kind of a motivational mechanism, that someone, if you see, if X has a high level of charisma and Y does not have, if X says the same thing to you, you get you tend to work better. If Y says the same thing to you, you may not. So it is basically the power of X, okay, that drives you to follow it, okay, and that is because of the kind of charisma that he has, and you you are driven by that. Overall, when you look at, leaders are vision creators. We say no, leaders are vision creators. Leaders do not just look at the goal. Leaders look beyond goal. When we compare leader and a manager, leader is something who breaks rules. I keep saying this, a leader, if you have to follow rules and regulations, you are not just a leader. You need to see within the given conditions, okay, within the given conditions, what is best. And if rules do not, do not support what you think is the best, you would always ask to change the rules. That's what a leader is all about. A leader has to have that kind of mindset that I need to look beyond the rules. Okay, because rules are given in a context. Rules have contextual value, and contextual value changes. It changes according to time, according to context. So if context changes, you will say, no, this rule cannot apply here. The rule has to change. If rule book has to be followed, you don't require a leader. A simple manager can follow a rule book. You give a rule book to the manager, and these days what is happening? Number of times you get a call from different places, and there are employees calling you. So it's a culture of tick marking. So there is a list of things that they'll ask, and they'll tick mark, and they will end the conversation. This approach is very transactional approach, and if a leader follows this approach, this leader cannot survive for long. This leader will not be a very effective. So leaders are basically vision creators. Leaders have to have the ability to articulate that, okay, and that is where we look at the practical aspect of leadership. Maybe I think towards the end, when we are done with all the theories, I will tell you how I look at leadership and what kind of things that are important, which I find that I think leaders of the future should concentrate on. Bass, in one of his papers towards the end of 20th century, in 1997, Bass had said that the best leaders are the transactional as well as charismatic. So both transactional leaders as well as charismatic leaders. Charismatic leaders, which is part of transformational leaders. Okay, and at times there are a lot of researchers. As I was telling you, I think someone asked when we were interacting. Someone was saying, charismatic leaders at times becomes unethical also, and when they become unethical, they are not effective leaders. They leave behind a bad legacy. Leaders have to operate within the ethical framework. Okay, so when people start misusing their charisma, okay, they become unethical. They start abusing the power. Power is given by the people to the leader or the follower to the leader. So when we relate power and the leadership, there is a very interesting relation between power and power comes from down to up, okay, and leadership comes from top to down. That's how we relate. So when a leader who enjoys power given by the people, given by the follower, misuses it, okay, cannot remain be a good leader. Okay, and that is where the good leadership happens. Okay, so we see that. Okay, so at times we find that charismatic leaders also fall prey to some of the kinds of unethical practices. Now, you see, when we were talking about traits at that time, in one of the contributions we talked about uh, emotional stability, emotional ability of leaders. In 2000, in the year 2000, Daniel Goleman wrote a paper in HBR that was leadership that gets results, where he talked about six types of leadership. Okay, and these six types of leadership, if you look at the modern structure of leadership, I think it's very, very important. Very, very important. People who want to read more, they can very well write down this paper. It was published in March, April issue of HBR. Uh, this sixth style given by Goldman talks about a leader should be commanding, should command respect, okay, should do means should have that power of telling others that, see, you need to do what I'm saying, and that power is coming from the followers. So leader should be commanding, leader should be visionary. As I was telling you, that leaders are vision creators, and leaders should have the ability to articulate their vision. Okay, so leader should be visionary, leader should be affiliated. Again, I take you back to McClelland's contribution. McClelland, who talked about needs, need for power, need for affiliation, need for achievement. Okay, this affiliation basically is related to position. So a leader enjoys position. It is related to positional power. Okay, so positional power, not 2021. It is 2000. The year is 2000. Okay, someone is right. Okay, so affiliative means leader should have affiliation. Important. Leader should be democratic. Tries to take people along. We keep talking about workers' participation in management. We keep talking about organizational democracy, industrial relations, and all things of that kind. So leader should be democratic. Leader should follow a democratic style of taking decisions. Because when leader imposes decisions, okay, for the short term, followers might work on those decisions, but in the long run, they may not go with it. And that's where it is important that leader should be, democratic, and leader should be, pace setter, pace setter, pace setter or trend setter. Okay, should lead from the front. Okay, so a leader should be, setting a pace for the followers. Okay, when we talk about authentic leadership, this is also reflected in authentic. Okay, so leader should set the pace. Leader should, avoid negative things, have all positive things. Uh, he should set high standards. Okay. And the sixth component of leader, what Goldman talk about, is leader should have the ability to coach. Leader should coach, or second order leadership. We should create second order leadership. Many times we find that organizations suffer because second order leadership is not. So second order leadership is very, very important. So when you are in position, you need to see who is going to come next and prepare, post it. And that's what will make you better. Okay, and so this, if you look at the literature, now I'm coming to what is happening after 2000 in leadership literature. So we talk about trait theory, we move to behavioral theory, and then we move to contingency theory. And in the modern theories, we're talking about transformational, transactional, charismatic leadership, and this Ullman's model where he talked about 6 kinds of leadership in 2000. Uh, now I come to, I was telling you the kind of methodology in the earlier works on leadership that was followed, and in last 20, 30 years, what kind of methodology is followed. Uh, Here, uh, anybody has read this book called Good to Great? Good to Great. Anybody? I'm sure that there might be some people who might be good readers. Uh, this session is organized by Sridham College of Commerce. I remember, I think something like 15 or 16 years back, I reviewed a book called, the title of the book was True Leaders, and Sridham College of Commerce had published that in its journal, the review of that long back. Anybody who has read uh, Good to Great? No, no one has read
Hello.
Good to Great.
Hi. Hello, sir. I have read Good to Great.
Who is this?
This is Dr. Hemlata.
Hemlata ji. Okay. So,
Could you name the book again?
Yeah.
Could you name the book again?
Good to Great.
Yeah. I have read, sir. And it's a very good book by Jim Collins on done on a research of those selected companies. And it's the research which they have run is really beautiful, and they have found out like level 5 leadership and all those things which they have.
Yeah, can you share that something? Can you
Sir, your voice is breaking.
Hello.
Dr. Hemlata, we can hear you, but Professor Shrutriya, we cannot hear you.
Okay. Because I thought there is some problem from my side.
Thank you so much, Piyush sir, for sharing the link in the chat box for the book that has just been emphasized by Professor Shrutriya. I think Professor Shrutriya is facing some network issues. He's just got disconnected. We'll just wait for a few more minutes for him to join back. I think meanwhile we can share once again the link to the attendance form and feedback form for this particular session while we wait for Shrutriya sir to join back. Devanshi, can we please have both the links? Thank you so much, Piyush sir, once again for sharing. I'm not able to read the topic, but thank you so much for sharing it. Leadership that gets results. Okay, great. Participants, we are just sharing both the forms. I'm just disabling chat for a while so that you all can have access to it. Sorry for the delay. I'm just putting it in the chat box. Also, I just had a word with Professor Shrotriya. He's facing severe problems with his internet and he's trying to join in as soon as possible. Thank you for your patience. Meanwhile, please fill in your attendance and feedback for this session. This is session 3. Today is 5th of July. The topic of the session is leadership and organizational behavior. Also, for those of you who joined late, I'll just repeat the instructions once again, which have been laid down by AICTE. So firstly, after every session, we'll be floating this feedback form as well as attendance form. And as per AICTE rules, all the participants are required to attend as at least 80% of the sessions and mark their attendance to be eligible for the certificates. Also, filling the feedback after every session is important as per the guidelines. And finally, on the last day of the FTP, that is on 9th of July, there will be an objective evaluation, that is an exit test. Again, as per the AICTE guidelines, you need to give the test, score at least 60% marks in the test, which will be uploaded on the AICTE portal, and that would form the criteria for the certificates as well. Sir is back.
Am I audible? Hello.
Yes, you're perfectly audible.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. There was a disconnection from my side. I think some problem in my internet. So I've joined through my mobile. So I was asking, can anybody tell me about this good to great and its contribution on leadership? Hello. Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, yes.
Yes,
Yes.
basically what I liked in Good to Great was the level 5 leadership pyramid, which starts from the capable individual, and the level 5 is the executive, like executive leader. So how you develop from an individual to a good leader, that is what I liked best in the book. And one more simile which they had given, that it is very important to have the right people in the bus. and you should throw off the people who are not the right people, and then you can take the bus to whatever objective you want to take. So these were the two things which I really liked in that.
Others, if you have not read this book, I would suggest, if you want to know about leadership, you should go through this book. Not only this book by Jim Collins, but Jim Collins' other books as well. Starting with Built to Last. Built to Last had comparison of two set of organizations. Okay, so two different sets of organizations, and similarly, Good to Great had different kind of methodology. Good to Great is based on the successful companies of the past many years. The database that they got the arguments on the successful organizations and failed organizations comparisons, and through that work he reached to a conclusion that the level 5 leadership is the most important style of leadership. And what exactly this level 5 leadership is all about, as Dr. Hemlata was saying, level 1 leadership is when you are capable. You are capable to lead the team. You are competent. You are a capable individual. So you are a level 1 leader. Level 2 leader is a leader who contributes to the team. Okay, so you see, you will find some tone of transformational leadership here. Okay, so you are a team member. You take people along with you. So it is a contributing team member. So there is a level 2 leader. Level 3 leader is you become a competent manager. You see that this is the task to be performed, and there is a team to finish the task, to complete the task, and you are leading. You also know how to do it, and you take people along with you and complete the task. So you are a competent manager to achieve organizational goal. Level 4 leadership is you are an effective leader. People listen to you. Okay, that is level 4. Level 5 leadership is that is an executive. So there is a pyramid structure. In pyramid structure, on the top there is one person. So he says that people reach from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, and level 5 leadership is the blend between professional will and personal humility, sense of humility, humbleness. Okay, and that's what makes you a great leader. I will be talking about that again just after a while. Since I'm talking about Jim Collins, I would suggest that you go through this book. Before this book, you go through another book of Jim Collins, that is Built to Last, which was before Good to Great. Read another book which will help you to understand why organizations fail. And that book is How the Mighty Fall. So he talks about those great companies which have failed. And he develops an argument that these organizations have failed because these organizations had a problem of leadership. There is a book by Ram Charan, Leadership in Turbulent Times, how leaders have transformed organizations. Okay, a person who led this company called 3M for around 2 decades. He had no exposure of technology, whereas 3M was a highly technological company, a technology-driven company. This person was an accountant in the firm, but he had a strong ability to drive people to perform better. Okay, and he had a strong sense of acknowledging the contribution of people, and that's how he transformed this company, this great company called 3M. I mean, it's a great journey. Okay, so this How the Mighty Fall is another book which I think you should read. And after that, Jim Collins wrote another book, that is Great by Choice. Please read that book. You would really enjoy, and your understanding of leadership, especially contemporary leadership, will become better. These books are available on all modes wherever you are. Okay. Now, so this was basically Good to Great came in 2001, and lot of leaders. If you go through the successful leaders today, Okay, especially the leaders who are of 40 to 50 years of age, or who are at the top, and you look at their reading list, I tell you 90% of them must have read Good to Great. Okay, so that this book really opens your head, especially from the practical world, and with a lot of examples. Now let me come to another a kind of leadership which took birth in the 21st century, and that is authentic leadership. Authentic leadership, Bill George wrote a, there was a paper in HBR also on this, where he talked about True North. Okay, and this book on authentic leadership by Bill George, where he talks about that a leader who does what he preaches. आपने सुना होगा, हम लोगों के यहाँ हिंदी में हम लोग कहते हैं ना, मनसा वाचा कर्मणा, कि जो आपका मन कहे और जो आप बोलो और जो आप कर्म करो. There has to be a coordination between these three. मनसा वाचा कर्मणा. Okay, तो मनसा वाचा कर्मणा की जो फिलॉसफी है वो आप वो जो है वो authentic leadership की philosophy. Like someone was saying, Gandhi was a transformational leader. Gandhi was a strong, authentic leader. He revolution means something which is very, very important. So which makes you an authentic leader. And the authentic leadership, a lot of literature is available. Many people have worked on and there are companies which are following authentic leadership, which are preaching authentic leadership, okay, sharing literature on authentic leadership, and are communicating with their workforce that, whatever you are doing, if you are into a team, what you are saying, what you are doing, there should be proper alignment. Very important. So what exactly authentic leadership is all about? Authentic leadership talks about having transparency in decision making. There should not be secrecy. Okay, so secret pacts shouldn't be there, but there should be formal decision making, and there should be transparent decision making. There, the pillars should be on, it should stand on ethical background. The practices should be ethical, and the leaders should have a strong moral value.
The voice is breaking.
The agenda should be open. There should not be any hidden agenda. I keep saying this, and a lot of researchers have also been done on that domain. Intent. Leaders' intent. Intent is something which is extremely important. A leader who has an honest intent and is able to communicate the intent to the. I was telling you about intent, and leaders should have a good intent.
Your voice is breaking. Excuse me.
Communicate that intent to the people. And if you have good intent and you take decisions and you take risk,
Shruti sir, just a moment. If you could just switch off your camera.
Because they trust your intent. Okay. That means common purpose. Okay, common purpose. Purpose of the team, purpose of individual, purpose of I am connected to my internet.
Yes, sir.
I'm connecting through my mobile. That's why maybe I.
So you're not audible at all.
There are some issues. Am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Maybe what I would do, just wind up by saying that how I look at leadership uh, of the future. Okay, so just to wind it up, maybe I think we can open uh, for some questions. I would say that we okay, clarity means there should be goal, defined goal, and compatibility. Second is communication.
I believe sir's audio has got disconnected once again.
Yes. Hello.
Yes, sir. So we are not able to hear you. Your voice is breaking a lot. So you are audible in bits and parts only because your voice is breaking. Sometimes we're not able to hear you.
Now.
No, sir.
Hello, am I audible?
Sir, you are audible only in bits and parts.
Am I audible?
I'll just type it in the chat box so that sir can see.
Yes, yes, yes. Anyway, so if there is any question from anybody, this is I was just telling about 8 C's. That please. I'm so sorry. Yeah.
It's okay, sir. We totally understand. Also, if you want, you can switch off your camera. Maybe that helps a bit to, yes, to restore the connection. All right, so I'll just say it on behalf of Professor Shrotia. If anyone has any kind of questions, you can unmute yourself and ask sir, or you can just type it in the chat box so that sir can see it and answer it.
Yes, I switched off my camera. Yeah. So sorry.
It's okay, sir. Not an issue.
Or maybe you can.
Thank you. Any questions for everyone? So there's one question: is an entrepreneur also a leader? Yes, an entrepreneur is a leader, as per sir.
Yes, yes, yes.
So there's one more question that has been received by me on my personal chat. How should be a leader, especially in work from home settings? How should a leader be in a work from home setting situation?
Yeah, in fact, that's what I was thinking of sharing about that. You know, you require a different set of. It is more to do with skills, the kind of skills that people need to acquire, and you know, it is. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. You are.
There is some problem again.
So we can hear you.
Yes.
Also, sir, Professor Preeti has sent a personal message saying that the example of servant leadership could be Indian corporates. I think she wants to state it. I'm not able to understand.
Servant, see, I did not touch upon servant leadership.
Actually, servant leadership is a topic for one of our sessions, which is to be held tomorrow. So maybe that would be a good platform to discuss about that, Professor Preeti.
Yeah, in fact, I have seen the program. That's why I did not touch upon servant leadership. Otherwise, I would have taken that here.
Right, sir. Right. Okay. Please let us know if you have any other questions. We still have Professor Kshatriya with us for a few more minutes. So we would recommend you to take full use of his expertise in this area.
I'm so sorry. In fact, my connection got disconnected.
It's okay, sir. Sometimes this is not in our hands. So it's perfectly fine and we understand.
Yes, agile leadership. Yes, this is the challenge in the given conditions.
Yes, sir. You're right.
Yeah,
Okay.
someone is asking about agile leadership. Yeah, agile leadership is all about adaptability. Uh, how agile one is, and adapting to the conditions, adapting to organizational needs and the needs of the team. So you see, when people are working in organization, one has to look at the organizational interest. There has to be compatibility within these three tasks assigned to them. Okay, so if there is a compatibility, of course you will see that this is the agile model. Sometimes a leader has to choose between two groups. Whose interest to support, advocate, what should organizational interest. In fact, organizational interest should be at the top. One, a leader has to sacrifice individual interest in order to safeguard organizational interest. There is a very, am I audible? Am I
Yes, sir, you are.
audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
We say that we need to find out which is our Hastinapur, because Hastinapur, you see, when the war was, Mahabharat was finished, and at the end, Yudhishthir was asked. So Yudhishthir was in tears, saying that, see, all my kith and kin, all my close members of the family are not there, died. Then there is an interaction between Lord Krishna and Yudhishthir, and Lord Krishna says that, see, you have chosen to safeguard the interest of Hastinapur, and that is paramount for you. Similarly, I keep saying this, the organizations and people who are working in organizations, they need to see what is their Hastinapur, and they have to safeguard Hastinapur's interest, okay, over all other interests. And that's how people have to choose, leaders have to choose. Any major difference between charismatic leadership and transformational leadership? Charismatic leadership is more on the individual. It is individual centric. Okay, means it is with the individual. It is the possession of the individual. Transformational leadership all moves beyond the individual. So charismatic leadership is on the basis of what a person possesses. Transformational leadership goes little beyond that, and that is where we say that transformational leadership is much broader